The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but women rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hiya! Toby! Bye-bye! Love you! Bye-bye!
Please take your seat above us. We're with you. It's time to pick up. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and liftoff.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Thursday, December 14th, Friday, December 15th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here for you 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot, the number 11 guitarist rated in the world, is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. Now, we're all over social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I'm at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. So you go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Once again, our website is almost up and running once again. It is spacedoutradio.com. I know Tim Doyle is working his tail off to get it back up and running. We talked all day about it. It is getting closer to being completed from our hacking incident a week ago. We also have a GoFundMe page going on right now. We had 2 beautiful donations from Mary Beth and Cheetah, and we are almost at 1/5 of our goal. We really appreciate it. If you want to donate to help bring this studio up to terrestrial form, yes, terrestrial radio form, go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That is GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We have 2 chat rooms for you to participate in. If you want to get in any questions to tonight's guests, you have to sign in to either Spreaker or go into the Facebook group, the SOR Space Travelers group, or if you're on Twitter, I'll get to your questions on there as well if you use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, usually we discuss what's on our website right now. As I just told you, it's been hacked, and we are improving on it, so we'll get to the plethora of features for you once we get back to our website domain and get back to normal. I tell you, I feel a little naked without the website up. I'm not going to lie. And it's not a pretty site, but I do feel a little naked with our website being down. Tonight, we go back to the future. Now, we're not using a DeLorean to get there, but tonight's guest makes his return just over 3 years since being our first ever guest on Spaced Out Radio. Alfred Lambremont Webre is considered to be one of the smartest men to ever take on and defend the controversial world of conspiracy and exopolitics. An Ivy League graduate, Alfred's own experiences led him down this path to see what's truly out there. He's studied time travel closely with Andrew Basiago. He's also worked closely learning about the ET agenda with people like Laura Eisenhower, who truly believes her great-grandfather Ike did sign the Greada Treaty with an alien species. It's about shaping the world and getting the truth out for Alfred. Some call him a truth seeker. Others say he's way too far out there. But no matter how you look at the gentleman, the man is considered one of the top legends in this field. Alfred Lambremont Webre, it's been just over 3 years since we've had you on this show. I bow to you, my friend, for coming on back. It's great to hear your voice. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, and I bow to you for how you've grown this station coming out of the Great White North and moving out into the world and filling the North American airways with truth, especially at this time. And I'm great, and I'm looking forward to our program. We have an exceptional guest with us here today, and that is Emily Elizabeth Windsor Craig, who is the daughter of King Edward VIII of England, and she will fill you in on all of that. She is also a lawful claimant to the crown of England to become a future queen of England and of the 13 or 15 nations that are there. And I spent 2 hours today live on Facebook in a webinar, which was extraordinary because she described how over the past 1,000 years, to quote what used to be a kind of a very central theater group back in the day in the 1960s, their name was Everything You Know Is Wrong. And it's sort of like we're repeating that now with all the truths coming out. And we're having according to Emily, and I back her up on this, we're having a restoration of truth and of law on this planet. I'd like to say how this began for me. This began a number of years ago when I was 16 years old. I was back in rural Cuba from my boarding school in Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden my friend comes over, and he's driving a black 1956 classic Ford Thunderbird with the top down, and on the side of it is the coat of arms of King Edward VIII, Honi soit qui mal y pense. And I said, how did you get that? He says, well, my father was up in Palm Beach, and apparently King Edward VIII, that's how, some people call him the Duke of Windsor. But as Emily will tell you, he was forced out in a power play by some very dubious characters, including the Archbishop of Canterbury, and his brother, and sort of what in modern parlance would be a Luciferian satanic conspiracy to force out King Edward VIII, because he was a God-fearing Christian and not a Satanist, and he would not go along with the plan then around 1936 or so to start preparing for the false flag of World War II, which Albert Pike, as you recall, back in the late 1800s, the Grand Master Mason had created the plan for World War I, II, and III. Well, I'm just giving people background here. Emily has been our longtime guest on News Inside Out and Exopolitics Radio, and we were able, in our capacity as a public advocate, to assist her in her claim, her now active and ongoing legal claim, to the Crown of England, which was filed in the UK Parliament and in the Privy Council, and which is going forward, even as some parties in England are promoting Will and Kate. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Emily Elizabeth Windsor Craig. Emily, are you there?
I sure am, Alfred, and thank you for your kind introduction. I really enjoy the opportunity to speak to the whole concept of monarchy, which hasn't even been discussed in academia for half a century. It's almost an unknown topic anymore. Nobody talks about monarchy. And so I kind of wondered, some of the people might have heard of the idea that the British monarchy has gone Luciferian, and other people might wonder, well, what does that mean in terms of how they conduct their monarchy? And so if anybody has questions, or if you'd like to lead where I go with the discussion, that would be cool.
Well, if I could jump in here for a second, Emily, learning about you, maybe if you could, for just the sake of our audience, explain your past, how you were tied to the royal family, and where are you now, and how you got to where you are.
cool, great, I can do that. And that, yes, that puts everything in perspective. Now, one of the reasons that I've been talking to Alfred for a long time is because of our common interest in ETs, particularly the reptilians and the Anunnaki. Because I had a life among the Anunnaki. My name was Eresh Kagal. I was the wife of Nergal, the daughter of Nanar, the sister of Utu, and Inanna, the mother of Ningishita, and so forth. And I have been able to pull up memories, and the reason that's salient is because the British monarchy is an offshoot of the Anunnaki monarchy. The Anunnaki monarchy has been successful for hundreds of thousands of years. It has never been considered old-fashioned or obsolete, okay? So that's the background psychic and telepathic and reptilian abilities that I brought to this whole study when I was confronted for the first time with the realization that Edward VIII had something to do with me. I had no idea. When I was an infant, I was thrown into the foster care human trafficking network, okay? And I was adopted by a Russian Zionist family who spoke Yiddish and brought up in the Zionist ideology, except I didn't fit in. I kept trying to go to church, and that drove the family crazy, okay? And so I went from church to church to church. In the meantime, I began cultivating the psychic and telepathic abilities that I was born with because my DNA derives from the Anunnaki so long ago. About 15 years ago, it was about that, I had quit working because I was sick. And I began reading into, as I had as a child, I read into the British monarchy, the fight between the red roses and the white roses. And so I was not working, so I read the biography of Edward VIII, and it connected with some of the things that my adopted mother had told me about her experience and my early experience. And all of a sudden I began to say, well, wait a minute, I'm in my 50s. How come I don't know anything about this? And I began researching because it wasn't working. And then my son graduated from college and sent me his college picture. He was 22. His name is Edward. His father's name is Edward. My father's name is Edward. And his picture at the age of 22 matched a picture in Edward VIII's autobiography, A King's Story. It was the same picture, Edward VIII of England and my son. Oh, well, that got me going, let's put it that way. Then I began researching into the life of Edward and why it seemed to be that the King's Story that I had read didn't match anything I was reading anywhere else. The stories didn't match at all. And then I matched up some of the other family pictures between Edward's family and my own children. And I could see clearly the bone structure similarities and the personality similarities. So then this started getting serious, you know? Like, what is going on? Then I began realizing intuitive and other sources of information that made it easier for me to do the actual research. I found out through these other sources that Edward VIII had an older illegitimate brother who was born in Bavaria, Germany in 1889 on April the 29th, who was part of the dynasty of the Rothschilds and who had something to do with the downfall of Tsar Nicholas. Also had something to do with the downfall of Prince Albert Victor, who was King George V's older brother. And then, the whole picture began focusing in on what happened to the British monarchy, that they walked away from their Commonwealth and they embraced Luciferianism in 1871 and thereafter began pushing for this worldwide New World Order. What happened? How did it happen? And so I've just been on this path to learn what happened ever since. Now, I've sent you a picture to your Facebook page, We Own the Night. And it's a picture, and if you okay it, it'll show up on your timeline, of the floor of Westminster Abbey. Now, Westminster Abbey was a monastery until about 1066, and then it became the abbey that the royals used for their coronations and weddings. Okay. The actual building that is standing right now was built by King Henry III in 1245. And so that's how old the stone floor is that was just uncovered. You know, when Queen Elizabeth was crowned in June 2nd, 1983, the whole floor was carpeted. And when her father was crowned, the whole floor was carpeted. But in the last decade, they've ripped all the carpeting off, and they have restored the floor under the carpeting in the main gallery of Westminster Abbey. And if you look at that floor, what you see is a large serpent snake entwined around the 5 continents of our world. One large snake in control of the whole world. And that was an idea from 1245, almost 800 years ago. So the Luciferian movement, and this was before the Masonic movement, it was probably early in the Templar movement, already had the idea that they were going to control the world. This is not a new idea. Now, in relatively modern times, you know, Queen Victoria was queen for a long time. She had a husband, Prince Albert. They were married around 1840. They had 9 kids. And in 1860, he suddenly died. For personal reasons, we don't know why he died. Okay. And what happened to Queen Victoria at that time is she shut down the throne. She wouldn't go out. She wouldn't wear anything but black. She wouldn't talk to anybody. For probably 2 decades, she shut down the British monarchy. Well, the Luciferians couldn't let an opportunity pass by. So about 10 years after Albert died, the Grand Commander of the Masonic Order, by the name of Albert Pike, made the declaration that it was time to stage the apocalypse, and they were going to do that by staging 3 world wars. If you would like, I can put up that, I can put up the text of that directive, but, it's just a bunch of text. All right. So from 1871 forward, not only the British monarchy, but the consolidated Masonic orders and their leadership, maybe not the lower orders, but 33rd degree and up, were given the objective and the goal to stage an apocalypse, an Armageddon, by bringing on 3 world wars. So, George V initiated the steps to make that happen. First of all, he kicked his older brother out of the royal family who married a Catholic woman. He got rid of Albert Victor. He got rid of Prince John. He got rid of Tsar Nicholas and Tsar Nicholas's family for not cooperating with the Rothschild movement to make banking a worldwide Rothschild Federal Reserve opportunity. So, 1913, George V helped set up the Federal Reserve. 1914, he was, let's just say he was kind of provocative and starting to make threats. 1917, he insulted his family in Belgium, the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, by changing the name to Windsor. In 1921, he set up Tavistock, the Puzzle Palace, to begin the official policies of lying and treachery in commerce and government. In 1925, he set up the Kalergi Plan to change the demographics of Europe so that there would only be elites and slaves. There would no longer be any consensual governance because this new world order was going to take over the snake around all 5 continents. Now, George V had the first son who was illegitimate, born in Bavaria, April 29th, 1889, who lived with the Schicklgrubers, and his name was Adolf Hitler. He was a British royal. Okay. George V's second son was Edward VIII, the legitimate heir apparent of the British crown, but he had a very sweet nature, as Albert Victor had, whereas Adolf was a tough nut to crack. And so George V favored Adolf over Edward. By the time Edward was 6 years old, his father, who had been a cocaine addict from his service in the Navy and the East India Company during the 1880s, George V stayed on cocaine and opium until his coronation in 1911. So his oldest legitimate son, Edward, was subject to his moods and his abuse until he was about 16 years old. So by the time that Edward was only 6, George was already planning to get rid of him. He employed 2 tutors, Hansel and I forget the name of the second tutor, who were fundamentalist Christians and who taught Edward the principles of honesty and truth-telling and decency and modesty, just straight out of the Church of England. So that when Edward was 16 in 1910, and he was sick and tired of the abuse of his father, he went to the Archbishop of Canterbury and asked as an adult to be confirmed into the Church of England, which placed him at loggerheads against his father, who was an avowed Satanist. Okay. By 1914, Edward was 5'1" when he was 20 years old. Can you imagine? His father's 6 feet tall. He's 5'1". He didn't thrive. He was this little, shrunken up little thing. And he went into the Grenadier Troop Guards and he marched off to World War I, 5'1", maybe he weighed 115 pounds. You know he wanted to get out of the palace. You know that he did. Okay. And he was in the trenches of World War I. He was a messenger, and he served in Italy and France and Morocco for 3.5 years. He lived through it. There was one attack on his life when he was in France in 1916 that was very, very suspicious. It sounded as if his dad was trying to get him. But anyway, when he left the army in 1919, he was a more normal height. He was 5'7", and he had become the darling of the British people because he always went to where the strikes were. He always went to where the problems were. He was for the people, and he was a populist, okay? He was a lot like Trump, okay? He was like Trump, and he loved the people. But his father was dedicated to the Masonic requirement to set up 3 world wars. So after World War I, and Tavistock and the Kalergi Plan had been established behind Edward's back, and Edward wanted to marry like all the princes do, George V called on a favor with the Earl of Strathmore and brought Elizabeth Bowes-Lyons to Edward and said, "Here is your arranged marriage, you'll marry this woman." And Edward said, "No way, I'm not marrying this woman." He never liked Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, at all. She was a different kind of person. Okay, so at that point, Edward and George began their fight over the right for Edward to marry who he wanted to marry, and not have an arranged marriage as his father had had an arranged marriage and his grandfather had had an arranged marriage. And so from then on, his father was saying to him, "If you don't marry the woman that I arranged for you, I'm not going to let you marry at all." So the men were completely at loggerheads throughout the 20s. And then in 1931, Edward met a woman through Miss Furness that George V wanted him to meet. It was on the QT, you see. Wallace Warfield Simpson had been an MI5 agent, an intermediary between George V and Adolf in Germany from 1917 to 1921, because she was married to a naval officer by the name of Spencer, who had put her through trauma-based mind control of the Satanist point of view. So she served George V in World War I, and in 1931, George V saw to it that she met Edward, and they had an affair. But in 1934, she had a daughter by the name of Elizabeth, and that daughter is 83 years old now. She's in Tennessee. She has her own website, we3.org, and she's still living. Edward sired a son in Paris in 1918, but he's deceased, you know. I mean, that was a long time ago. All right, so in the life of the grandchildren of Queen Victoria, there were 3 cousins who looked exactly alike: George V and Tsar Nicholas and Kaiser Wilhelm. In fact, we have pictures of them where they dressed like triplets just so people couldn't tell one from the other, because they all wore their beards the same way. All right, so that was the beginning of the idea that they could use doubles to take the place of somebody that didn't want to do their royal job that day or that night or whatever. So when Wallace Warfield Simpson left the scene to go have a child and move to the United States, the southern part of the United States, she was replaced by a doppelganger, somebody who looked just like her, whose name was Claudia Ruth O'Keeffe, who was the sister of Georgia O'Keeffe, the artist. And Edward fell in love with the doppelganger, Claudia Ruth O'Keeffe, and married her in 1936. But by then, the steps to eliminate the self-sovereignty and self-sufficiency of Britain had taken hold, and the king died very, very suddenly. We haven't figured out exactly how that happened yet, because there are some accounts that say he was poisoned, and there are other accounts that say, well, you don't close the beer on somebody who dies of a sort of a natural cause. So we don't know how King George V died suddenly at the young age of 71 in 1936. But at that time, Edward was terrified because he knew his father had a strong relationship with Adolf in Germany. He knew that they had kept that relationship throughout World War I, and they were now ramping up to Second World War with a collusion between Britain and Germany. And the researchers that I'm part of now are going to show that there was a formal collusion between Germany and Britain throughout World War II as well, which is not what we're taught in history, is it? Are you following?
It's heavy. I'm not going to lie. It's tough to swallow when you've been taught one way for so long. Yes,
and it's mind-blowing. But anyway, there are some researchers in Germany and Egypt who have the documentation, and they are financing the movie that is going to show how all of this transpired. Okay, and so the bombing of London under King George VI was a staged false flag attack. Okay, so what has happened is that the legitimate covenantal monarchy of Britain has been taken over by Luciferians who want to run the world under a top-down worldwide Luciferian tyranny. And for those of us who have worked our whole lives and who believed that we would have a stake in the governance of our nation, we have been robbed. Okay? And so what I'm doing is I'm telling this story over and over again. In fact, I've sent the claim to the Royal House in London, and I've laid it all out. What the monarch should have done if the monarch had been following her vows, which she did not, what her powers were that she might have used to bring to a halt some of the corruption and tyranny that we have witnessed, and what she has done instead as a hospitality and PR executive. Okay, because that's all she's been doing is playing game show host and handing out prizes. That's all she does. Now, there have been religious obligations that the monarch is supposed to accept and take responsibility for. And one is to protect the law system so that the common law system is always what is applicable and under jurisdiction on the land. Going back to Henry VIII, who was the original Antichrist, who eliminated all of the abbeys and monasteries and convents in England when he became king, all right, his daughter Elizabeth I adopted maritime admiralty law because her navy defeated the Spanish Armada and took over the administration of the seas. And so since Elizabeth I, maritime admiralty law has been encroaching upon common law constitutions and common law jurisdictions everywhere in the West. So this is whereas the Queen was supposed to protect the common law system, she has allowed the encroachment of the maritime admiralty and profiteering system of corporate statutes. Okay. The Queen was supposed to protect the Church of England, its teachings and its methods of educating the people in morality and ethics. What has happened instead is that the Church of England has become an agency of progressive political correctness, and anyone who considers himself to be part of the original Christian covenant has been alienated. Okay? The Queen was supposed to protect the lands of the kingdom. Instead, she has allowed the lands to be sold off to foreigners. So she has not done what she was supposed to do. And there are lies that have become standard doctrine that the young people have no concept of. Okay? Lie number one is that the UK has only been in existence since 1603. That's all that's on the royal website. But the fact is, the line of kings, the bloodline of British kings, goes back to 583 BC, when the prophet Jeremiah and King Zephaniah's two daughters landed in Tara, Cork County, Ireland, and set up the kingdom there. Okay. Lie number two is that Roman maritime laws of the sea and of the admiralty are now dominating. Lie number three is that it's reasonable to set the two sets of law against each other in the Temple Bar Association without ever articulating the difference, just simply profiteering on the confusion. Okay? Lie number four is that the citizens of Britain and the Commonwealth can be treated as cattle who are not privy to the different sets of law and their contents. Lie number five is that the law should be so voluminous and complicated that it becomes impossible for a normal citizen to navigate through the legal system. Lie number seven is that the nation can live by liberty and dominion that sets the legal profession against its own people. Okay? So what Alfred says to me is, well, what are you going to do about this? and that's a reasonable question. And so this is what I've decided to do. I describe the failures and faults and malfeasance and deceit and treachery to whoever is willing to listen. And also, as my master's degree is in conflict analysis and conflict communication. And so what I'm saying is there needs to be a new monarch from the psychic, telepathic, the reptilian Anunnaki bloodline. They need to come from that bloodline because that bloodline has the psychic abilities that the job requires. the next monarch needs to be educated in mediation, arbitration, conciliation, and checks and balances like the King of Belgium. Now, one of the things that I've done is kind of bring myself up to date with all of the monarchies in Northern Europe, just because I was curious. Okay, and I noticed of all the videos on the monarchies, the one that impressed me was the one in Belgium, and by the way, they are also Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family members. It's the same family in Belgium. And the Belgian elder king, who just turned over his kingdom to his younger son, Philip, spent a whole video describing how he conciliates and mediates between factions and interest groups and constituencies in his kingdom, so that he's never involved in politics, but he's always getting people to cooperate together and to make things happen together by sharing, and not just with money. So that's what I'm trying to encourage, that the Privy Council is going to lay some heavy requirements on the next monarch in Britain, that they're not going to get away with just being a game show host giving out prizes and having garden parties and hoarding huge assets that never get used for the benefit of the people. I mean, even the regalia could be assayed and used as collateral for a currency that has a gold backing, but that hasn't even occurred to Theresa May, that they can solve some of their own problems without just relying on the financing, the usury financing of the Rothschild banks. So I'm just trying to get them to make some intelligent corporate decisions, because a monarch needs to have at least the free agency of a corporate CEO, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. Alfred, how are you doing over there? Are you still alive?
Yeah, I'm here. I wanted to give the latitude to Emily, because I think that she, judging from the from her papers and the application that she has made in the Parliament, in the British Parliament, and in the Privy Council, and judging from her background and her intelligence and her sense of balance and her sense of history and knowledge of what a monarch does. A monarch is not an absolute ruler. A monarch is more of a mediator. And in the British system, the monarch provides a very needed sort of mediation role. Now, the fact is that historically, the British system and the world have, for about 1,000 years, been out of balance from a traditional beneficial role of government. I couldn't believe it myself, but when I first went to university in the fall of 1960 at Yale, they had the political union there, and one could join one or other parties. And I actually joined the monarchist party. And I've always wondered what led me at the age of 18 to go and join the monarchist party. And I think it was because that summer I was jailed. I was in Cuba, and I was jailed by the Castro Revolution, and it was Fidel Castro's sister, who my uncle knew because he was in the movie business in Cuba, and Fidel Castro's sister was the head of the Cuban Cinematographic Institute. And when I was jailed because of my father's position, nothing really that I did, it was sort of harassment, but the orders were out there to take me away from the sugar mill where we lived in Eastern Oriente province in the northern part of it. The orders were to take me to this army camp, and if I'd reached that, I never would have matriculated that summer into college, and my life would have been totally different. But fortunately, Fidel Castro's sister picked up the phone to the commandant that had me in jail there. There were about 18 of us, including my father, that were jammed into this room that was the size of a large closet. And so that was kind of my introduction to politics, was to be in the midst of a revolution. And today in our webinar, the place we ended up after reviewing the last 1,000 years of deceit, lies, and treachery that have been put out by what I would call the Anunnaki hybrid reptilian Israel connected. Let's just call them Israel connected, with their cohorts, the Khazar army of infiltration into finance, government, business, law, religion, military. They run the world pedocriminal networks. They're an absolute scourge on this planet. And they have set themselves up as a caste that can just rape and pillage the world. Several years ago, starting in 2011, I found myself very fortunate to have been appointed to the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal and to be part of a tribunal of distinguished jurists that brought a series of international war crime charges against the United States, against Britain, and against the state of Israel. And I learned a great deal there. And what I learned from the evidence, not only there, but as a judge, along with Connie Fogel, one of the most distinguished women human rights lawyers in Canada, was that it is the Anunnaki reptilian hybrids that we commonly call, the Zionist Jews, and their cohorts, the Khazarian Mafia. Some of the familiar names there are everyone from the Rothschilds to Benjamin Netanyahu. And just in our lifetimes, they were the principals behind, I learned as a judge and heard more than 20 witnesses and reviewed all of the documents. that these Illuminati, Anunnaki, Khazarian, it's the closest thing to a walking human reptile. Those are the people that are really leading Israel and leading this worldwide conspiracy to enslave humans and to ecocide this planet with their Khazarian cohorts. And really, if you count them up, there are only about 26 million of them, but over the ages, they've managed to obliterate every nation that they've come into. And they have come into the United States, most especially since the Civil War, which was started by the Rothschilds and the Anunnaki reptilian humans, which are otherwise known as the Jews, and the Khazars, the Rothschilds. And since the Civil War, the United States has had, and this is a statistic that was quoted to me by an international expert at dinner the other night, it has had 3 years of peacetime.
Alfred, I'm going to have to cut you off right there because we have to go to break right now. Alfred Lambremont Webre is our guest tonight. We are having a special guest as well, Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Craig, who is joining us as well as we get into the monarchy, extraterrestrials, the alien agenda, government agenda, Zionism. We're all over the map tonight, and it sounds absolutely great. We're going to step out for a quick break here on Spaced Out Radio. When we come back, more with Alfred and Emily right after this. You're listening to the mighty SOR. And during the break, don't forget to head to our GoFundMe page, gofundme.com/We Own the Night, to give us a hand at improving our studio technology. We'll be right back.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at SpacedOutRadio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at SpacedOutRadio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at SpacedOutRadio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At SpaceOutRadio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to SpaceOutRadio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our Advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio Live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, the crypto guru, Ronald Murphy, is back along with Brian Bowden. We get into everything cryptid tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time. We'd like to say hello to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, islands and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Yeah, it's one of those. Coprostasophobia is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with us during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. You can also follow us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website will be up and running very shortly. It is spacedoutradio.com. Normally we have a plethora of features to go through, but we'll wait till the site is back up. It'll be new and improved. It's going to be great. And also, we have a GoFundMe page going right now. You go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We are looking for your help and assistance in recreating our studio to make it more technologically advanced so we can take on terrestrial radio and move this show up to where it needs to be. Tonight, we are talking with Alfred Lambremont Webre, and we've graciously been joined by Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Craig as well as we take a look at the Anunnaki, ETs, reptilians, the royal family. How is it all tied together and how does it affect what we are doing today? Alfred and Emily, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it is all tied together. The Anunnaki are tied to not only to the royal family of Britain and the kingdom of David of the Jewish covenant, but they are also tied to the Elanu Treaty, which became the format for the Greada Treaty that President Eisenhower signed in 1954. And that treaty has become the boilerplate for the other commercial treaties, the TAL 9 and the TPP, in which, because they follow the Maritime Admiralty set of stipulations and guidelines, there are no human rights in those treaties. That's why human trafficking since the 1950s has exploded, because the Greada Treaty, as reported by William Cooper in Behold a Pale Horse, because he was able to get in on the negotiations. The Greada Treaty allowed ET abductions, allowed human experimentation, allowed people to be kidnapped. And so that's what human trafficking is. And so human trafficking has become a major, major business. Now, as an infant, I was trafficked because the royal family was getting rid of all of Edward's children. Edward had 4 or 5. I'm not sure about Andrew from Alberta, Canada. But there was the original Elizabeth in 1934, there was Margaret in 1939, and there was me in 1944. And we were all removed from Edward's care and dumped into the foster care system with false identification, so it took literally decades and decades to find our way back. So the legal environment has been affected because the Anunnaki are subject to the Elanu Treaty that was signed after the Lyran Wars at Orion Nebula, which was 800,000 years ago. And what those treaties stipulate is that there are always superior and inferior races, and the superior races have the responsibility to administer the inferior races, which it builds racism into all of our treaties and legal systems, which to me is horrifying because I don't see any use for racism. Every person has a gift. Every person knows something that I don't know. And so racism is the tool, the divide and conquer that the Anunnaki method for socializing has exploited all along. That's what the conquest of the North American continent and South American continent was about presumed elites dominating over people who were maybe not technologically as sophisticated, but certainly socially at least as sophisticated. In Ashiana Dean's Voyagers 2 book, it's a huge book. It's probably the only book of its kind in our world. She has received information that takes us all the way back to the beginning of the first incarnation of this living world. Okay, it used to be called Terra. And Terra had a series of wars and had to be reseeded, and a series of wars and had to be reseeded, and then it blew up, and that's why we're a hemisphere sitting on a sheet of ice, and not in the configuration that we are taught. There's practically nothing that we're taught that's true or real. Okay, so in the original 5 root races, the 5 colors, black, brown, white, yellow, and red, there were 5 genders. But in the Anunnaki model of socialization, there are only 2 genders, and that's why the Abrahamic covenants only discuss or think about or talk to or speak about 2 genders. And so what we find out biologically is that gender is analog, not binary. The Anunnaki live in eternity, not in time. And this creates problems, perception problems, because they don't understand what it's like to have to catch a bus or keep food from spoiling in the refrigerator or get your children through school. They do not understand time, so they've never been able to understand human experience. And so the treaties they've given to us, and I think they were well-meaning. I don't think that they ever intended to cause us harm. They're in factions like we are, and at this point they have been mostly annihilated by the ice storms of 2013. There are not that many Anunnaki still left. Their monarchy is gone, and so there are not enough of them to dominate our minds anymore as they used to. You know, you can have your mind dominated by someone else's thought being introduced, and that's what our media is so good at, and that's what our movies are so good at, is introducing thoughts and relationships into our minds that we can adopt uncritically or question. And unfortunately, we have been taught, particularly the younger generations have been taught, to go along to get along, to just kind of absorb whatever our culture has to offer. Unfortunately, that doesn't provide any way to either confront or change what isn't working. And we have a lot more arguments over opinions now than over facts. And, well, anyway, it all boils down to treaties and the difference between maritime admiralty law versus the common laws and the profiteering on law and the profiteering on medical services, which was forbidden until 1973. We have so many problems that we have to address, and our media are not equipped to give us the facts that we need to fix them. And so personally, because my own soul has memories going back through several lives, I have the sense that there's a principle, what goes around comes around. You've got to reap what you sow. I think that events are going to come to a correction point, a tipping point. And once that happens, we, the humans who are still here, are going to have the opportunity to fix our problems and reorganize and move on. And that's my hope. Does that make sense?
Well, it certainly makes sense to me. And to pick up one of the threads that you've been talking about, Emily, there's a very practical step, I think, now that can be taken that I've spoken about publicly with the great-granddaughter of the U.S. president who actually signed the secret Greada Treaty with the Draco reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians, and that was Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower. And we discussed how one of the legal steps that can be taken is that this treaty can be unilaterally abrogated by the chief executive officer of the U.S., that is the president of the U.S. Now, the current president of the U.S., Donald Trump, has stated that he would abrogate a treaty that he's not in favor of. For example, the climate treaty, and the issue there is that it was the 1954 Greada Treaty that gave over the entire authority of the U.S. government, and in fact of all world governments at that point in the post-World War II, such that in the United States and contiguous Western governments, the police, the FBI, and the equivalent in all other governments were told to stand down and not go after missing children, because in each country now, a quota of children is developed every year to be delivered and transported under the Greada Treaty to the Dracos and to the Anunnaki reptilians and to their human co-conspirators for the solar system trade, the intergalactic trade, and for the planetary trade in children, be they children for ritual child sacrifice, children as sex slaves, children as meat. That is what has occurred as the result of the Greada Treaty. All of the federal governments and the state governments stand down. For example, with Oleg Damagard, we did an investigation in West Virginia on the use of a state park there as a staging area for the transport of children for pedocriminal purposes, and we found that the deputy star that the West Virginia's state troopers use the points of that star contain the man-boy love association symbol that the FBI has for pedocriminal groups. And that's now built in institutionally into the law enforcement areas.
And David Paulides talks about these disappearances, and he has traced them to about 30 locations in the U.S. He has a map that shows the locations where children are missing all across the United States. But it isn't just across the United States, it's Europe also.
Exactly. And those locations can be pickup locations for the terrestrial Drangheta, the terrestrial mafia that distribute the children to organized religions for their ritual child sacrifices, to corporations. We found that one of the largest food corporations in the world, in fact, conducts ritual child sacrifices at their corporate campuses, at their corporate headquarters.
Which corporation is that?
I don't have the exact name with me, but it's in interviews that I've done. Jay Parker talks about, in the United States alone, there are 40 million intergenerational satanic Americans that engage in ritual child sacrifice and other, I don't know whether you call it luciferic or satanic, but it's evil practices that are part of this. So we have the laws that now govern this planet and set up how the administration of justice, of government, of policing are done are the result of one-sided treaties that are signed with the Draco reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians, and the closest human community to these are the 26 million who are Anunnaki reptilian hybrids and or their Khazarian armies of infiltrators.
Now, you know, the Khazarians are not aware of this.
Yeah, I know.
They are not aware that this is going on.
That is, they are not aware because in the treaty, the governments, the human governments are now charged with covering this up. You have the entire U.S. government, from the president on down, has to structurally, to meet this treaty, order the FBI to stand down with any missing child. That's why the FBI doesn't go after missing children. All of those children on the outside of milk cartons and the children in Amber Alerts, all of that is window dressing to keep the population in a consensual trance that they live in a safe space on the surface of the planet, when the opposite is the case. What happened is that the world governments, with the exception of one or two countries, and the leading country that's the exception is Russia. Russia will have nothing to do with it. And when Russia held the Olympics at Sochi, the word went out that yet there's going to be no pedocriminal activity in all of Russia in Sochi when the Olympics come in. And it's at these international or athletic organizations that pedocriminality normally happens. Well, what did the Western press, that is controlled by 6 Anunnaki reptilian, hybrid, Jewish, Rothschild, Khazarian corporations. What did they do? They accused the Russians and the Putin government of being anti-gay, which is a complete reversal and cover-up. That is total fake news. That is cover-up. Their stance was to stop the pedocriminal activity which accompanies the International Olympic Committee and all of these internationalist organizations, which are just outgrowths of Tavistock and other institutes that were implemented, in essence, to carry out what we in the vernacular call the protocols of the Elders of Zion, i.e., a plan to carry out a cultural genocide of humanity by 26 million of genetically engineered Anunnaki reptilians who they're like dinosaurs. Today, it was just yesterday that I was coming back from an appointment, and I have been meditating on these issues, on the genetic factors, which I think are very important. There's a difference between race and genetics. There's a difference between reptilian and human. And I passed here the headquarters of one of the extreme right-wing rabbinical institutes that in the 1970s, in the course of my research, I had been denied an appointment with. And I was sitting on the bus, and a very, very elderly gentleman came in, and he was the image of a velociraptor. They looked like velociraptors. These are reptilian hybrids who hunt humans. We have had here in my home as a guest a very close friend of ours who last week in the prairies had to witness her brother, who's a cosmologist. He was exterminated. He was put to death in a manipulative fashion. One could call it executed by what's called the legalized death here, or legalized suicide, but it's really legalized death. And he went into a special unit where his cancer was misdiagnosed intentionally. He was intentionally given the wrong medications until the cancer got so advanced. And as the final step in this team, which is composed of doctors from certain underdeveloped nations, that are trained to be part of this death squad that come in, and finally, when they allow the cancer to get to a certain extent, they bring them to the head of the team, who is a psychiatrist from Israel living here in Canada, who says to the patient, well, it looks like soon you're going to die. And it just gives him appointments like you give to cattle who are about to go in. And here in British Columbia, there was just a special run, program run on CBC just a couple of nights ago. In Vancouver Island, the rate of assisted death, it's not assisted suicide, it's assisted death, is, I believe, 6 to 8 times larger than in any other area of Canada. And I was discussing it over the past several days with the sister of that is with our close friend whose brother was in effect assassinated. She told us, he said, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And intent is one of the main things here, but they have an integrated team that goes in and works on these people and in essence executes them in the way that you execute someone condemned to death in a death penalty country like the United States. And this is something that is happening here in Canada. The teams are from Israel. They're organized by Israel. They've been infiltrated in by what I call these velociraptors. And they look like velociraptors. They get on the thing. Their mouths and their teeth are very large. They have the features of a reptile, not the features of a human. And it was very, very marked. And that is what is going on now. And people have to wake up about it because you have the same panels, death panels, in the United States. You can go to our blog called EbolaGate. Just do an internet search on EbolaGate and you go to our blog, and there are multiple articles there on how the Obamacare and the versions of it is really the setting up of death panels in the United States. I can tell you that I have witnessed and just had our close friend lose their brother. She said to me, he reminds me of you, because he was a cosmologist also, because I began to talk to her about the omniverse and other topics. And he was targeted and murdered. And what's occurring now is that in Vancouver, there are tremendous land grabs. There are 40,000 vacant houses because the houses in Vancouver are actually like securities that are traded on the Hong Kong market and on other foreign markets. And it's all of the elderly here in Vancouver that have been moved off to Vancouver Island, which has, I believe, it was either six times the assisted death rate of the rest of Canada. And they're coming in here, they're pushing the elderly out. They go to Vancouver Island, they have special death squads there. Vancouver Island is known historically for deep satanic cultures, and they are just euthanizing all of the genuine Canadians, and it's Israeli psychiatrists that are leading this. And I'm reporting to you actual facts and actual cases which are occurring now, and they're going to begin to occur in the United States. The United States police has been trained by the Israeli police. The Trump wall, I know that a thing, but Trump is just a puppet for these people. The Trump wall with Mexico is a meme of the Israeli wall with the Palestinians, and there's no precedent for it in American history. It's totally foreign. It is a Anunnaki reptilian different of caste thing of the Americans versus the Mexicans. The Mexicans are an integrated part of the United States. They were there before the United States ever became. They do all the stoop labor. They pick all the fruits. And now you can't get fruits and vegetables in many parts of the U.S. because of the Israeli policies that have been administered now in the U.S. And they start eliminating the food. You can't grow. It's a criminal offense to grow food, to store water. All of these are setting it up for the euthanasia of the entire population. They're making the U.S. into the Hollohawks. but the real Holocaust, and that is into death, one big death camp for the U.S. because it is being led covertly by these velociraptors that are the Anunnaki reptilian hybrids, and their Ashkenazi invisible army of infiltration. And this is something that we have been documenting for a long time. We were able to show in the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal that each successive wave of Jewish settlers was actually an act of war. In 1947 to 1948, there were between 1.5 and 2 million Palestinians that were genocided. They were either slaughtered in the village, or they were cast out of their own country where they had lived for centuries by these velociraptors and by Ashkenazis from Brooklyn and from other parts that had nothing to do with that region and that were there as a result of bribes in unmarked bags paid to Harry S. Truman and to Lord Balfour. This is a race that operates on the basis of criminal behavior as a class. Now, I wouldn't even call it a race. I would call it an animal species. I would call it an animal species. They're a species of velociraptors. They are Anunnaki reptilian hybrids, and they lack the conscience of a human. And that's, over to you.
I'm just horrified because I'm one of them, but I don't share in any of their ideological policies or methods or means. To me, the end justifies the means is a sign of mental illness. And so the Ashkenazi family that raised me as a foster child were secular materialists. They were progressives in terms of their politics, but in today's language, they would be called snowflakes because they simply lived by their ideology without much reference to the facts of matters around them. They were kind of harmless people. I don't know. I really don't know how we can isolate. But maybe this is the purpose and reason for all the surveillance that we're experiencing now, is for people to be differentiated and categorized. I really couldn't say. Alfred, I'm at the point where I don't know what to do.
Yeah, look, a number of years ago, in the late 1980s, as a lawyer, I litigated a series of 26 complex cases in the courts of the United States and Canada. This is in a book called The Levesque Cases. Now, we're going to make that book available online in the near future. We were able to win a $750 million default judgment on behalf of our client, which was overturned in a crooked proceeding before a crooked judge in Ajax, Ontario. They took it to this little town at the edge of Toronto and just, threw the case into a black hole because they could not do it in the main courthouse of Toronto. It was such a disgrace. But we won it fair and square. And that case showed and had evidence of what the what these organizations had done, including what we can call the Sanhedrin, which is the secret Zionist government. And one of the main members at that time, the Bronson family in Montreal, was one of the members of the Sanhedrin families, and they control the prime ministership of Canada. You know, it was Trudeau then, and it's Trudeau now, and he's utterly controlled by the Sanhedrin. And
well, if we can get the monarchy in Britain back on to the principle of consent, of governance by consent of the governed, and governance by mediation, arbitration, conciliation, and cooperation, then we can proceed with abrogating the Greada Treaty and its human trafficking provisions. That's the only path that I see that I can participate in a positive manner. But what you're describing and what David Paulides...
That isn't true, because I was the judge. I was one of the two judges on the 9/11 War Crimes Tribunal. That court was so pressured that we had the director of architects for 9/11 come to Vancouver and pressure to have the videotapes destroyed, and the building in which the theater in which our proceedings were held is now demolished. You can go into the evidence of 9/11 and show that it was created primarily by the Anunnaki reptilian hybrids of Israel and the Ashkenazi. Wait, let me finish. And the Ashkenazi, those were multiple dual citizens, and they were just operatives of the Sanhedrin, which is the secret Jewish government. And the thing is that everyone in the United States is so brainwashed that they don't even think that there's a secret Jewish government. But that's who runs the United States. Benjamin Netanyahu has said publicly that they run the United States. Well, they are the Sanhedrin, which is the secret Jewish government. That government is a Anunnaki reptilian entity. It is extra-legal, unlawful, genocidal, and should be prosecuted, and it's not, because you're dealing with interspecies war, and that has to be recognized, that it's interspecies war.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging that. Now,
no problem.
I want to come back to our host, please.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Dave.
I've just been sitting back enjoying this as much of our audience has, because it's been a very eventful conversation so far. What I am getting out of it, to bring this up a little bit more up to date in regards to the Greada Treaty. Now, Alfred, you had stated that George W. Bush had renewed that account. Am I correct? He renewed the treaty with... Is that with the Dracos?
Well, apparently this came out in my conversations with both Laura Eisenhower and with Emily. These treaties are renewed about every 10 years. So you have the first basic treaty was signed in 1954, and then every 10 years. So then we know that the THAL 9 treaty was signed by George H.W. Bush.
Okay.
That's George Bush Sr. Emily's actually more of an expert as to the details, because she has interacted with people who have been on the actual negotiating teams.
I know Dan Burish pretty well.
Okay,
and he was involved in the THAL 9 treaty, And he gave me the links to it, and I read through it. And there is simply no mention of any human rights in that treaty. You know how our Constitution sets out the definitions of inalienable human rights. The treaties don't have any inalienable human rights. The treaties are all about exchanges of value for value. So when a human life is a commodity, as it is for any of us who have a social card with our name in all capitals that set up bond collateral on Wall Street when we were born. That's how our birth certificates become collateral for national debt. Okay, those of us who have the all capital name on our identification are technically chattel according to the Maritime Admiralty idiom of law, and we are the ones who are subject to these Maritime Admiralty treaties, the Greada and the THAL 9 and the TPP. Now, I've read through the TPP treaty also, and like the THAL 9, it has no mention whatsoever of human rights, nor of environmental rights, nor of rights to life. So it is completely mercenary. And this is why the Greada Treaty has to be abrogated formally, because according to those treaties, human life is nothing but a consumable. And that will not do. And so that's one of the objectives and goals of my work, is to point this out.
Now, Emily, if you don't mind, I want you to break down what is under this THAL 9 treaty, because for a lot of people, especially a lot of our listeners, are contactees or abductees, and they may not know what is actually happening to them. So can you break that down?
Well, the THAL 9, because there is no reference to human rights, is only all about exchanges of value for currency. And so for the people who have identification with their names in all capital letters, they are considered as consumable products to be bought and sold. We are slaves in this system. And that's why the THAL 9 is reprehensible, because there is no right to life. There is no human right. There is no a right to family. There is no right to education. There is no right to clean water. There's no right to clean food. There's no right to nothing. It's all about exchanging value for currency, which is exactly what Maritime Admiralty law is about also. So the treaties are based on the most mercenary commercial values that reduce humanity to consumable products. And that's what has to get changed. And I think it's not just the Greada Treaty that has to be abrogated, but so does the TPP, and the THAL 9 has to be abrogated, and the TPP has to be rewritten, so that there is some inalienable right to life and to not being abused as a slave. When you see how animals are abused by merchants and industrial farming, and how they're treated so cruelly, you wonder, well, why doesn't life itself have any inalienable rights to exist? And when you look at the movement of technology into robotics and artificial intelligence, and they keep telling us that they want to replace biology with mechanics, that just feeds right back into their mercenary commercial attitude that says there's something wrong with biology, it needs to be replaced with electronics and mechanics. That's crazy. That's crazy thinking. There's your psychopathic thinking right there. So these treaties have to be renegotiated, and for that to happen, the Temple Bar in City of London has got to be reorganized, and their caste system of elitist Masons who were the ones who directed staging 3 world wars in the first place, those guys have got to be kicked out. The people who want to stage wars have got to be, destruction is never a blessing. Life itself is not a problem, okay? And there is the principle from which the monarchy needs to operate, that merely destroying life is not a goal. Am I making sense?
No, it makes total sense, but for the people who are being taken at this point, and we only got about 5.5 minutes before we got to go to break here.
Yeah.
But for people who are being taken at this point, they're not looking at it at that level. They are looking at it as, does the government know about what is happening to me? And if they do know, and disclosure happens, is there a recourse that I could have if I find out that they know about what these beings are doing to me? Because people are not having a control.
There is no recourse, because what is happening to people, which constitutes crime, which is abductions, kidnapping, human experimentation, human trafficking, and body parts trafficking, and now cannibalism, these things are lawful under Maritime Admiralty, TAL 9, and TPP treaties. They are crime is lawful. And so we have to somehow get rid of the people who believe and think and act as if crime is lawful, and we have to replace those people with people who have more sense than that, who realize that destruction is never a blessing and life is not a problem to just obliterate, because you make money by obliterating, killing is a business now. That's crazy. Now, like Alfred says, killing has become a business of the Obamacare and of the death squads, and of the abortion clinics, and of, there is now a Japanese restaurant where you can buy human flesh served to you. I mean, it's getting loonier and loonier, and we need a reorganization of law and of the people writing law in order to have some consequences for the Looney Tunes who have been writing crime and making it lawful. They're nuts. Okay? That's where I come to with this, that our government has just simply gone crazy. And we have to somehow move them out of place or make them irrelevant or reorganize somewhere else, or because the government people either don't recognize or don't want to recognize, or they're in denial, or they have something else going on in their head that says Maritime Admiralty laws and UCC codes and administrative codes are sufficient to define lawful relationships in our country, even though kidnapping and human trafficking and sale of body parts and adoption marketing and so on is all lawful. It's all lawful. All the crimes we're talking about that are in the Greada Treaty, they're all lawful. Cannibalism is becoming lawful. How do we, how do you deal with that, Dave?
I'm sorry. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I do not believe for a second that cannibalism is becoming very lawful. And yes, there are people in the world that are sick. Okay, there are people and tribes in Africa and South America who are obviously cannibalist type tribes. But saying that there's restaurants in Japan that are legally serving human flesh, I don't buy that would be legal, because Japan is quite conservative as a nation. ever since World War II.
Okay, well, I have opened up a question in your mind, okay, and now you will do your research and you will answer your question because I've opened it, and I'm going to keep looking too because it seems impossible that these things would become legal, but if you study the work of the policeman, David Paulides, Paulides, he puts out updates every few weeks on the number of disappeared people and disappeared children in our country. All right. And if you look at his work and if you look at what's happening to the number of people who are, in fact, disappearing,
I agree. There's people disappearing. I'm a contactee and an abductee myself, and I can tell you the last trip I took was not very pleasant. Not very pleasant whatsoever. Yeah. And in fact, I threatened that little bastard, as he was leaving. And I couldn't catch him because I was still a little wobbly. Yeah. But we only got about 60 seconds left.
I want to interrupt with some facts. In the case that in West Virginia that we studied with Ola Damagard, the children that appeared to be trapped in an underground cave area for staging, they were being guarded by men in suits, and the police came by and shooed away the people who wanted to call the police. So the police are the law and the authorities. So the police are obviously following a higher law. That higher law proceeds from the authority of the Interspecies Treaty, which is an instrument known as the Greada Treaty, which trumps human social law. So therefore, cannibalism, which is what goes on in the underground bases with the Dracos, that is consumption of human flesh,
that I agree with.
Legal and has been I'm finishing. Is legal and has been legalized under the Greada Treaty. QED. It has just been demonstrated.
Awesome. Emily and Alfred, hold on one sec. We got to hop out for our final break of the night. Our guests tonight, Alfred Lambremont Webre, Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Craig. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. This one's going all the way. I can tell you this. This is an intriguing topic. We are going the distance here, and I'm having a lot of fun. I hope you are too. We'll be back with more SOR right after this.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you're seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, the Crypto Guru is back. Ronald Murphy. He'll be joined by Brian Bowden, his investigative research partner, and we will get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We're hoping to have it up and running tomorrow. You know, it's been a while since we had the Crypto Guru on. I'm kind of excited about it. I really am. Really enjoy the Crypto Guru. He is one of the best guests that we've had on this show. So we get going once again, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Yeah, man. You know, I can say it perfectly away from the air. Coprostasophobia. Coprostasophobia is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You could join us for live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. You can also follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR, and we are on YouTube, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. If you want to check out all of our archives, be sure to subscribe to that. And of course, we're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows from iTunes. Our website will be up and running shortly. Is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you could do us a favor, be like Mary Beth, Cheetah, and Eve, as they are the latest donations brought forward on our GoFundMe page. Yes, we have a GoFundMe account going. We are trying to build a better studio here in Spaced Out Radio land. And, of course, we could use your help. Go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. Once again, GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We would really appreciate your support to improve our studios so that way we can make a run at terrestrial radio. Now, we want to say thank you to Alfred Lambremont Webre and Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Craig for coming on in the first 2 hours of the program. It was definitely interesting indeed. We are joined by our resident scientist, Eric Markham, from Spaced Out Radio. Eric, welcome. It was an interesting first 2 hours. I'm not going to lie. It was an interesting first 2 hours of the program. And, you know, there's a lot of brain power there. There really is. However, you know, I'll be the first one to say, you know, there's not many times where I disagree with guests in such a nail-biting fashion, if we could put it that way. But I think there's a point where, you know, when you have guests on like Alfred, who is a brilliant, brilliant man, and Emily, I didn't know she was coming on the show until literally a few minutes beforehand. You have to really take everything with a grain of salt. They're the ones doing their research. This is the findings that they're having. However, I do believe at certain points there are a lot of real news mixed with fake news. And it's a real gray area at the end. And usually I have no problem, Eric, in letting our guests speak. I think maybe to a flaw sometimes and to a fault sometimes, I allow our guests to go a little bit, I don't want to say overboard, I don't want to say that. But at certain times, I really believe that, I stand against fake news. And at times, I don't like it. I don't take it. So when Emily there, and I'm not saying to pick on her for this, okay? And I'm just pointing out the example. To say that there's a Japanese restaurant serving human flesh, well, it's simply not true. She said, do the research, so I did. Google's a very, very easy tool to use for research. And I don't know how many articles I found during the break that said it's a fake story. Never happened. Right? Never happened.
I believe there was a restaurant in some far-flung province of China that was selling human flesh at one time. But as soon as word got out, the government came in and pretty much wiped out the whole scene. But that's been many years ago, probably 5 years ago or better.
I agree.
And I'm wondering if that Japanese one if it wasn't one of those kind of like an urban myth that there was a kernel of truth, but it got flung out there.
I fully agree. Now, we do know, and let's be honest, we do know that there is cannibalism happening in this world. We know there's still some lost tribes in South America and Africa and little islands around the world that are literally, they don't like other people invading their territory, and they have no problem feeding on human meat and human flesh. That's true. That is true. But to say that you can go to, McHumans and order up a bicep burger with a side of fries and Coke, or Pepsi, because I'm more of a Pepsi guy, I think that's dangerous. I really do think that's dangerous to be saying things like that. And if you're relying on fake news to, put the jelly on your peanut butter sandwich, I do have an issue with that. I really do.
Well, that's a danger of going into some kind of research with a preconceived conclusion. To me, it sounds like they obviously had their view, and they cherry-picked all the data they could find to support their view. That happens in research all the time. But, we all just saw a very graphic representation. I'm not saying either one of them, I don't want to impugn their intelligence whatsoever. In order to actually dig into what they were digging requires some thought, but it seems to me they only took the data that would prove what they wanted to, what their conclusion was. And that's not research. That's just, I'm not really sure what the term for that, very much biased, research at the best.
Yes, I agree. But I'll tell you where I do agree with them. Okay? And I really think, and I realize the skeptics out there are going to yell their famous word, proof. But I do believe that there are a lot of merits to what they are saying regarding the research of David Paulides or Paulides, however you pronounce his last name, as well as information on the Greada Treaty. Now, if you talk to a lot of people about the Greada Treaty, which for those of you who may not understand what it is or are joining us late, okay, the Greada Treaty was apparently signed by President Eisenhower in the mid-1950s with an extraterrestrial species believed to be Draco Greys in regards to trading humans and animals on this planet for technology. And apparently the Dracos took it a little bit too far than where they were going to go. Now, if you listen to Emily, that treaty has been re-signed over the decades, the latest being with George Herbert Walker Bush when he was in his presidency, called THAL 9. I believe there is something to that. I really do believe there is something to that. And it just makes sense, because all of ufology always seems to point back to those dates of the Greada Treaty. Doesn't matter where you go, it all seems to point back. Grant Cameron, who I think is the greatest or one of the best researchers going right now when it comes to the field of ufology, even admitted that on this program. And others have as well. And I think there is something to it and to the merits. Now, can we prove it? No. It's probably so locked up, it's probably above top secret, where the President of the United States, this being Donald Trump now, can't even see it. Do you think there was a treaty?
Well, it seems like there's a lot of buzz about that treaty, and it's one of those cases where there must be some kernel of truth somewhere for it to have persisted this long. I think the problem is, without it being open, it's sort of like the Pine Gap story. What Pine Gap is amazing enough on itself, but when they didn't disclose what it was, all these other myths built up around it to fill the vacuum. And I think that's what we've got with this treaty. Yes, I believe that it's plausible that that treaty exists, but without disclosure, everybody has added, as it's come down the line, 50-some years now, almost 60, people have filled the vacuum surrounding the information, around that treaty. So it's become, you can almost pick your conspiracy and tie it back to that treaty.
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, you look at the way technology took off in the 50s. You look at how slowly mankind moved previous to 1950 over the centuries. And you look at what we have done, say, since 1955 up until today. Now, I'm not sitting here saying with a tinfoil hat on that it's 100% legit. I don't know. What I am saying is I do believe everything seems to point around that same time when this alleged treaty was created. To go from... I realized coming out of World War II, we were getting into jet engines, courtesy of the Germans, okay? And then in Korea, there was the first air-to-air combat between jet fighters, the MiG-17, or the MiG-15, pardon me, and the F-86 Sabre, your first ever dogfight between two jet aircraft. Okay, but to go from, in a span of, let's say, 10 years? Preacher? 10 years from the end of World War II to 10 years later, the start of the development of the technology of the U-2 spycraft, which is still in existence today, leading up to going Mach 3.3 plus with the SR-71, which started its design in the late 1950s. That's a big jump. Am I just seeing this, with rose-colored sunglasses, or do you think that jump is legitimately large?
Well, I can see my first career was in electronics, and I can actually see where you could go from vacuum tube to transistor. That seems to be one of the big things that they cite. How did we go from vacuum tube technology to the solid state? But when you think about it, early transistors were the nomenclature and the function was exactly the same as vacuum tubes. So I can see that becoming a normal, what's the word I'm looking for, a normal evolution from one technology to another. All they did is remove the gas out of a glass tube, and you have a transistor. Even the parts are the same: emitter, collector, collector, base emitter, and collector, which was the same as what was on the vacuum tube. So I can see how that would have evolved naturally. And let's not forget, Germany was the apex of scientific research. Back when my mother was trying to get her biology degree, she had to take German classes because all the best research was still being published in German. So it's not unusual to me that we got this jump when we gathered up, Operation Paperclip. Everybody's heard of that. We went through Germany and swooped up every scientist we could find. The Russians did the same thing. So we get a technological jump from an influx of new thinking. So between you have the Roswell crash and the supposed leak of alien technology, along with this influx of some of the greatest minds in Europe, and you can almost see how the mythology would form.
Well,
not to mention that some of the stuff that came along later was really stuff that Tesla had invented at the turn of the century, and people were just looking at it again.
I'm not denying it. And on Twitter, I'm getting a little bit of a snarky comment here. It says, "You ignore the facts when convenient, Dave. All of these developments built on previous developments. There is a literal paper trail of studies, white papers showing how these things came about. But, ignore that." No, I'm not ignoring that. And it is a good comment. That's why I'm mentioning it on the air. It is a good comment. However, I'm just stating that if you talk to a lot of UFO researchers and alien researchers, not all of them are twisted. Not all of them are a bunch of spooks who are trying to, bring a bunch of disinformation. There's a lot of information and finger pointing that goes on that it was possible the Greada Treaty actually happened. And if that is a part of it, where technology was traded for humans, I think there's something to that. Could I be absolutely wrong? Could I be wrong?
No,
yes. Yes, I could.
One of the things to consider, though, is, and I don't know which way this plays, but if Eisenhower signed that treaty, I think by the time he left office, he must have known it had been probably the biggest mistake of his presidency. Because as he's going out of office, he had that State of the Union address where he looked right at the camera, steely-eyed as the Allied commander should have been, and said, beware the military-industrial complex. I think if he signed that treaty, he knew that he had opened the door to a horrible thing. The man looked haunted in that picture, or in that film clip, and you can look it up. He obviously knew something bad was going to happen from it.
Well, you look at what's happened now.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're constantly in war, and I don't know. I'm not prospering from it, but there are a lot of interests and a lot of companies out there that employ millions of people who are, profiting madly from the conflict in the world, and not just in the United States. I mean, they sell AKs to one side, we sell M16s to the other. Somebody's getting rich while these people kill each other.
I would fully agree. The military-industrial complex, alive and well, coming to a theater near you, eventually. I don't think a lot of people in this area, though, and what I mean is North America, because we're, on this one big giant continental island of our own here, I don't think the majority of people there realize how dangerous it actually is out there, though.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, as a rule, you don't wake up and find in your local newspaper that 27 bodies have been found with their heads cut off. You don't have the Mexican cartel wars going on in your backyard. By and large, we in the United States and Canada have it pretty good. I mean, there's urban areas where it's, a jungle, but not, by and large, even in that very same city where you have all this atrocious behavior in one centralized location, outbound of that, people, get up, read their newspapers, go to work, come home, kiss the kids, play with the dog in the front yard, the so-called American dream. And I think maybe the consequences are we're paying for that at the cost of a collective soul, because there's some just atrocious crap going on in the world that's allowing us to live like this.
Well, I agree. I mean, it does come down to the military-industrial complex. That's the biggest burden that we have right now going on in this world. Let's face it. Let's face it. And it is disgusting, because I think us as regular everyday citizens are sick and tired of this happening. We're sick and tired of the lobbyists. We're sick and tired of the rules of engagement. We're sick and tired of people dying when they don't need to die. We're sick and tired of invasions. We're sick and tired of it all. I mean, I dare to ask anybody to put their hand up and say, this is benefiting me.
Not benefiting me. I know that. Yeah.
It's not benefiting me,
not directly.
which is why Canada pretty much pulled out of the Middle East. And a lot of other countries have as well. Because we kind of look at it and we say, okay, what do we do now? We're not doing anything to win. War used to be about winning. A good old-fashioned war was about win and lose. Would you agree?
Exactly. Now it's about getting... It's almost like you're doomed to failure before you go in now with rules of engagement. I mean, the enemy we're fighting over there has no rules of engagement. And taking a moral high ground is just, it looks good in the press, which is what it's supposed to do. But, it's not about winning wars. It seems like it's about getting bogged down in an endless quagmire of conflict. Meanwhile, the people that make the AR-15s and the Bradley assault vehicles and the M51 tanks are rolling in cash because they're just cranking them out.
20 years ago, if I would have only known, I would have put all my money into military shares. I'd be loaded right now. I would be loaded.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine what Northrop Grumman stock is probably trading for right now? And what it sold for 20 years? Of course, Northrop Grumman was on the top of its game back in, about 20, 30 years ago, because they were the primary supplier of the Navy's jet fighters, the F-14. Probably the most awesome, probably about the best warplane we ever designed. And having family in that area, one of my acquaintances said that the only reason the F-14 got replaced was politics. The plant that built the FA-18 Hornet, which took forever to replace the F-14, was in a different congressional district, and it actually became sort of a war to get the money to that district. That's the easy way it was explained to me. But the F-14 should have never been replaced. It's still a more dependable platform than what we've got out there. It could survive a lot of things that would take our latest, greatest. So what is it? The F-35 joint, that stealth fighter. If the computer knocks out of that stealth fighter, it's unflyable. It takes a computer to make the micro adjustments to keep that thing in the air. The same with the B-2 Spirit bomber. Without a computer, the pilot did very little to keep that thing in the air. It was all run by computers. The stealth fighter, the first one that came out, again, fly-by-wire, computer controlled. Computer goes out, you've got an unaerodynamic flying brick you're trying to navigate with.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree, and it's something that we have to take a long seat back and say, okay, when is enough is enough? And unfortunately, I don't think we're any. We can sit here and talk until we're blue in our face. Lord knows there's enough radio shows out there that are talking until they're blue in their face about this topic, but getting out of the military-industrial complex is literally going to take decades. Because this isn't an American problem, it isn't a Canadian problem, it isn't a British problem, it's a world problem. And, as long as you got, Rocket Man over in North Korea thinking that he wants to be a player in the game when he can't even feed his own people, I mean, that's just one example of, everything kind of being screwed up the way it is right now. So, unfortunately, that is what it is.
I just think if we took the billions and the manpower hours and the effort and put that toward solving our, what's going on in the industrial complex, if we could redirect that toward renewable energy, pick your topic du jour that would make the earth cool, It would, it couldn't take that long. To, if we quit trying to create a newer, better way to kill somebody and try to create faster than light travel, the kind of money that goes into the industrial military complex, which is basically pouring sand down a rat hole to nobody's benefit, but a very few that are at the top of the corporate ladders. I mean, the whole planet would evolve within a decade. You wouldn't recognize it. But that's not going to happen.
Mike B. says here, but it is benefiting you. All the fighting that the U.S. and Canada do is to ensure that we have cheap gas and rare earth metals for our cars and TVs. It hasn't been about legit self-defense in ages. Come fill up your tank here. If you want to see how much it's affected gas prices, come to Canada and fill up your tank. What's your gas prices down there?
Okay, I have a car that'll run on the alcohol fuel, E85. My last fill up was $40 US, and my price per gallon was $1.82.
Okay,
$1.82 or $1.83.
So how much?
If I use the ethanol.
All right. So how much does it cost you to fill up your tank? $40?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you and I have
only because it'd be twice that if I used the unleaded, which is in the $2.48, $2.50 a gallon. It'd be about twice that.
Okay, whatever. Cheapest gas, your E85. Here it's E87. Okay. All right. So if you use your cheapest gas and I use my cheapest gas, it's costing you what, $40 to fill up your tank?
Yeah,
right?
Every bit of it. Yeah.
Okay, now let me tell you what gas prices in British Columbia are like. Due to tax and the fact that for some stupid reason, even though Canada could be self-sufficient for the next couple hundred years, but the way free trade works, it never seems to work that way. Our gas prices here, it costs me, and I have the exact same vehicle that you do, 2011 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It costs me $85 to fill my tank.
And you pay by the liter.
Yes. So I'm paying right now around $1.20 a liter. All right. So that equals out to, let me see here. I'm just trying to get a conversion here on Google.
1 liter is like 0.26 of a gallon.
Right.
So you're paying more for a liter.
Yes. So if I were to convert it to...
It's 3 gallons. It's 3 gallons to the liter, just over 3 gallons, or 3 liters to a gallon.
Yes. So I'm looking here, and I believe that would equal around $4 to $5 a gallon. $4 to $5 a gallon. It sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
So,
and even if you factor in, the difference between what a Canadian dollar is and what a U.S. dollar is, it's still exorbitant. I mean, that's a big chunk of somebody's money going into a tank. That's a non-durable good. That you have to buy that to get around, and it's not like it lasts that long. I don't know about you, but when I'm running ethanol here around town, my Jeep gets about 11 miles per gallon. And it doesn't do that much better on the interstate with ethanol. So if I'm taking a road trip, I might start out with the ethanol, but my next fill-up's going to have to be unleaded. I get 228 miles out of a highway miles out of a tank of ethanol. I get close to 500 out of a tank of 87 octane, or the cheap crap. The balsamic vinegar of gasoline still gives me more mileage than the ethanol does.
Well, it's interesting to say the least, man. It's interesting.
It would actually probably be money ahead if I would just go ahead and fill up with the regular gas, because when you think about it, I go twice as far on the gasoline that I do the ethanol. But I use the ethanol here in town because basically I just run back and forth to work during the week.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally down to the Sheets to get a sandwich or something. So I'm not, that tank will last me 2 weeks the way I drive.
The first world problems that we have. The first world problems that we have.
Yeah, we're not even talking about having water to, there are so many things that we take for granted. I mean, as long as you're paying your water bill, I can walk into any faucet in the house, get water. I can always, unless there's a snow scare in Winston-Salem and every loaf of bread, jar of peanut butter and jelly, and gallon of milk is gone, you can take for granted being able to go to a grocery store and buy enough to survive on, or, and luxury. I mean, there's not that many countries in the world where you can just walk in and afford to buy a steak or, beef or any of the meat proteins as readily as we do.
I got to say this.
Places around here I can get right off the farm.
I got to say this. I went to the supermarket today because the wife was working, and I had to get some food for dinner. So I figured tonight I was going to make spaghetti. I needed pasta sauce. I got a couple of the tomato paste cans. I got a couple of some really nice, what's it called? Sun-dried tomato. Goodness, I can't even remember. And it's almost like an antipasto kind of thing to throw in there. Anyways, tasted really good. Got some vegetables to put in there, frozen. I got one of those frozen vegetable bags because that way it's a little bit of a time saver for me. I couldn't believe my bill for 2 cans of spaghetti sauce, 2 cans of tomato paste, 2 cans of this antipasto stuff, vegetables, a pack of chicken breasts, and a pack of beef was $44. Remember the days when it used to be cheaper? You always hear your parents, eat at home. Eat at home. It's not as expensive. The way I look at it is yes, I'll get a couple of meals out of it. I'll get a couple of meals out of what's there. But I paid $44 for 2 meals. Could have shoved a couple of cheap burgers down my kids' throats.
That's true. You
mine as well.
Also set up and try and eat healthy. Like I'm on trying to get some of the weight off and, do something about my, my lifestyle. It costs a fortune to eat healthy. I mean, you can buy case in point, get a nice salad and some vegetables for a week, or, a couple of days worth. I don't like to buy too far ahead because they spoil. You're looking at $40, like you said. I can buy a loaf of bread for $1.68, and I can buy a thing of, just God only knows what kind of bologna, what kind of meat's in the bologna, made with chicken, pork, and anything else that falls into the vat for less than $1. I can actually buy enough food to last a week for less than $10 unless I'm trying to eat healthy.
I love John's question here on Twitter, and thank you for bringing some humor to the show. John on hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter says, how much does it take to fill up the UFO with some pure Anunnaki fuel? 3 humans?
Oh.
That is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Thank you Thank you for sharing that. That was just, I needed that laugh. I really needed that laugh.
At least an arm and a leg, right?
Literally,
Very
I believe.
least an arm and a leg.
Exactly. I hope I don't become one of those food type people for aliens. Maybe that's why I stay chubby, is because I got too much gristle around the middle. For these aliens to want to feed off of me. Maybe that's why they keep bringing me back. I got too much gristle.
They keep testing. It's like, his fat content's still too high. He's unhealthy to eat. It would cause they tried to cook you or me, they'd have a grease fire on their hands.
Hell yeah, they would. Yeah, they would. It would be interesting, though. Think about this for a second, though. It would be interesting that, let's say it comes out that we can prove the alien phenomena of abduction. Okay? Yes, to me there's proof because it's happened to me, and others can say the same thing. But let's say the government finally comes out, UFOs are real, aliens have been abducting people for whoever knows how long. Okay, let's just say it's all on the table, it's all right there. It would be interesting to see a study on the type of people that are taking. So let's say, are morbidly obese people less likely to be taken compared to somebody who's, say, a gym rat? Or if it's not a gym rat, maybe somebody who's kind of in the middle, like, I don't know, librarian or architect guy. You know what I'm saying?
Well, look at our own preference in meats. You look at that. You look for, if you're buying a steak, you look for that marbled look, where there's a little bit of fat running through it, but not a lot. It'd probably be the same.
I'm wondering though, like,
I don't know.
Do these aliens go to the supermarket and say, "Wow, that's a nice ham hock," that's definitely, that's definitely my type of meat. Not much fat there, and looking at a human leg there that's all peeled off. I don't know. I mean, it's gross to think about, but I think it's hilarious at the same time. It now makes me wonder. It honestly now makes me wonder what is going on.
Well, one of the things to consider is it wasn't until pretty much the Abrahamic religions came up that cannibalism was frowned upon. I mean, we had to have we had to take on a higher moral code as a species before that was considered a taboo. If you look at, paleontologists all the time, they find Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal remains that obviously show, tool marks on the bones. Whether they can't prove that they were eating the flesh. That's one thing. It could be they were preparing them for sky burial like they do up in the mountains of Nepal, where they basically they flinch you out a little bit to make it easier for the vultures to consume what's left. So we don't know if they were doing that or not. But as tight as food was back then, it's pretty easy to assume that they weren't letting the meat of their vanquished enemies go to waste. So it took a while for us to evolve a higher And it apparently tasted all right because the evidence goes for tens of thousands of years that we were eating each other. So it took a religious prescription against it. It had to become a taboo. It wasn't something that naturally evolved.
Either way, I don't think I'm on the menu for any aliens. I really don't think I'm on the menu. Maybe that's why I stay a little chunky. Maybe that's the reason why.
I got it. Yeah, I don't think I'm on any of the menus either. Hopefully.
I know. I can tell. But nonetheless, getting back to the whole point is we only got about 15 minutes left here in tonight's show. It just goes to show with a topic like this how far down the rabbit hole really travels and how that rabbit hole can take some very weird and strange turns. Don't you believe that, Preacher?
Oh, absolutely. You can take a benign subject and you can chase it down to its most absurd conclusions and come up with, things that make sense in a weird way. Is that the flexibility of the human mind to adapt, or is the rabbit hole really that deep and that crazy?
Well, I guess the way I say it, and people have heard me say this on the show numerous times, where when you first open that door and then you close it behind you and you turn around and you'll see another 10 doors, and behind each of those 10 doors is another 10 doors each. So you go to 100 doors, then 1,000 doors, then 10,000. It's ridiculous because it just seems like no matter how far you go, it just never seems to end. And the answers that you are searching for always seem to be just a little bit out of reach. And I know for myself, I find that very frustrating, when we have, people promoting that fake news. We have people promoting, storylines that are so disingenuine that realistically they shouldn't even be printed. It's a waste of time. But then you get intriguing stories. Take, for instance, like what we've heard and we talked a little bit about this last night, about how a lot of ufologists will actually read the National Enquirer or Star magazine because they believe, or they have been tipped off by their own sources, that's where the U.S. government actually tips off a lot of their UFO stories to, because they know the majority of the public isn't going to buy it, but they could say, hey, at least we brought it to the public. So it's getting difficult to believe anything in this field. It really is, because you don't know where to search and where not to search. But I will say this, I don't buy for a second that it all comes down to some Jewish Zionism. Personally, and I'm going to swear here, so for our terrestrial stations, I apologize. Personally, I think it comes down to assholes versus non-assholes. And lobbyists and people who are making billions off of the military-industrial complex rather than blaming the Jews a la Hitler. I don't buy that for a second. I just don't. And I'm not trying to make this political, but I don't buy it. I think it comes down to assholes. That's just me.
Well, one of the things you have to look at is the Jewish people have been a scapegoat for centuries, as far back as you can go. They were, one of the first monotheistic cultures, and they just pretty much made themselves a target. Plus, their practices and their tendency to stay, aloof to those around them. So, it's easy to blame a people and a culture that you don't really know much about. And by and large, the average person knows very little about the Jewish culture. We know Hanukkah. We know about what a menorah is. You know, some of the pop culture stuff that leaks into our TV and whatnot. But as far as the traditions and what the Jewish people really are, there's very little common knowledge.
Hey, I can sit here and say point blank, you know, that I've been screwed over by a culture. Okay, I have. I can sit here and blame my entire life and everything that has happened in my professional career on the Dutch. The Dutch being cheap, the Dutch being liars, the Dutch being this. Honestly, because there's a huge Dutch community where I used to work. And I say that sparingly because my wife is Dutch. Her father was born in Holland, and every time he comes over, I give him a hug and I start patting him down, asking him where his first dollar was or where he's hiding it. You know, but we can all find a scapegoat. You know what I'm saying? We can all find a scapegoat. Exactly. I think it's human nature. So, I mean, you know, it gets a little bit ridiculous because of a culture, because of a heritage, a skin color. I'm so sick of that bullshit. Pardon, I shouldn't have swore there. I apologize. It just kind of works me up a little bit. I'm just so sick of that. You know?
Well, and it does not just... You can take almost any ethnic group that rises to the top, say, wherever business is, it seems like there's a cultural group. Like here in Winston-Salem, it's the Moravians that are pretty much the top of the crop. So in a lot of cases, the people would put the Moravians in the same place you put the Dutch, or could put the Dutch. I don't think it's so much a matter of cultures as it's a matter of who is the dominant business force in a given geography. You know, for me, one of the groups I could complain about would probably be Hindus. This is the guy I worked for before I went to college. He was
yeah, but it's easy to pick out.
A deceitful SOB.
yeah, but you know what? You can blame whoever you want. You can blame whoever you want. The last time I checked, if I cut my arms open, you know, and I cut your arm open, guess what? It's the same color. We bleed the same color.
Right.
You know?
That's the problem. That
and
you can track that us against them mentality in America all the way back to early 1700s, late 1600s. There was that us against them type of thing, and it was fueled by a little thing called the Stono Rebellion.
Well,
we're still paying for that.
And, you know, my grandfather, God rest his soul, I loved the man. Okay, when he was in his younger days, and being of Ukrainian heritage, he used to fly off the handle. Him and his buddies used to fly off the handle if somebody called him a bohunk. I have no idea what a bohunk means. I just learned about that a couple of years ago. But my grandpa used to take people outside the bar and clean their clock if they called him a stupid bohunk, which I guess was, you know, an insult to Ukrainian people, you know, who came over here and they weren't very educated, but they knew how to farm in tundra-type land. And I look at it now and I think, would I be offended over being called a bohunk? Does it even matter?
Would you even know? Yeah, would you even know what they were saying?
I don't even know. You know what? That's a good thing. I'm going to actually Google that right now. What does bohunk mean? I think that's how it's spelled. Oh, it means an immigrant from Central or Southeastern Europe, especially a laborer. So that's what it means.
Yeah, it seemed kind of benign on the surface compared to some of the other racial epithets.
Exactly.
You know, we had I grew up in Michigan, and there was in the area I grew up in was a very heavily populated by the Polish immigrants. Matter of fact, they were brought in because they were excellent foundrymen, steel workers, and at one time, the little area I lived in was an iron founding town of some repute. And the local iron workers went on strike. Well, the guy that owned Round Oak Stove and Foundry said, fine, go on strike. He took these cattle trucks out to Ellis Island, and anybody who had foundry or machining experience got a free ticket. They even got, he even set them up with homes. They still had some, they called them the Round Oak homes. Granted, some of them had dirt floors and outdoor plumbing, but when you consider where some of these people had come from, that was a step up. So I didn't know until much later in life, you don't call, that calling them Polacks was actually, like your bohunk thing. It was, that was considered an epithet. So, they were called Poles. Well, I didn't know that till I was probably in my late teens. And, most everybody I grew up with was of Polish descent with a really hard to pronounce last name. So it's interesting how that will progress.
Yes, another topic for another night, because I'm not going to get into much more of the racial crap that is out there. But this is your resident bohunk. Yes, your resident bohunk on the air here is just enjoying his last 2 minutes of being on the air tonight. Last 2 minutes. But interesting topic indeed. Interesting topic indeed, my friend. I still believe, though, I want to do more research, getting back on topic. I do want to do more research on that Greada Treaty. I think there is something to that. I think we need to pay more attention to it.
Yeah, I think it needs to be researched further, if we can find anything legitimate to research on.
Well, Dr. Michael Sala has some incredible research on it. And, it's like one of those smoking guns, man. I mean, you think about it. If that paperwork does exist, could you imagine what it would be like to head on over there and actually read that word for word to see what it's actually like? And do aliens even know how to sign their names to a treaty? Or do they come with a stamp? This is what I want to know.
Yeah, I wonder, how do they sign a contract? It's got to be some kind of seal or some kind of symbol.
I agree.
Or it wouldn't be a legit contract by earthly standards. It wouldn't be maybe their idea is as long as it's printed, as long as it's in print, it's legitimate whether it's signed or not. Signing a contract is a human construct.
Exactly. My friend, thank you so much for coming on in for hour number 3. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate that. You and go enjoy the sights. And you hold on for a second. I am going to wrap up tonight's show. I want to say thank you to Eric Markham for joining us in hour number 3. Eric is the resident preacher and our resident scientist here on Spaced Out Radio. We want to say thank you to both Alfred Lambremont Webre and Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Craig for coming on for the first 2 hours of tonight's show. Tomorrow night on the program, the crypto guru finally makes his long-awaited return to the mighty SOR. He and Brian Bowden will join us as we talk everything cryptid leading up to Christmas. We'll see how the year in cryptozoology was. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. In the background, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL jamming out to Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Space Out Radio, rocking us in and taking us home every single night. We appreciate the rock star for joining on the SOR team. I also want to say this. Thank you to everyone who has so far supported our GoFundMe crowdfunding. where we want to try and raise some money to build a new studio here in SOR HQ so we can start making a run at terrestrial radio. We're almost at $1,000 of our $5,000 goal. That's $5,000 Canadian, about $3,800 American. The exchange rate kind of gets in. Remember, if you can, and you want to help us out, go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. Once again, GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. I want to say thank you to everybody listening at home, listening at work, in their vehicles, everybody who has taken part on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio tonight, in the SOR Space Travelers group, and on Spreaker. You made it an awesome night. Continue to share our show. We love it, because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. Good night.